What do you eat? How did you go to school? How come your English and your grades are so good? These are some of the strange questions I had to face when I moved here. My name is Lala. I'm from Mali. I'm not a refugee. I never had Ebola. And the only pet I had growing up was my sister's goldfish, not a lion. Nice to meet you. I thought of myself as a normal student until people made me feel different every time I mentioned my origins. I moved here a couple of years ago. Little did I know I would turn into a spokesperson for an entire continent. I realized that whenever I introduced myself, people didn't know where Mali was. So I would start giving geographic details. Mali, Africa. But I contributed to their misperception that Africa is a country and not a continent with 54 countries in it. So I would say Mali, West Africa. But they thought West Africa was a country because they heard of South Africa, which is a country indeed. So finally, I would give as much details as I could. I'm from Mali, a country on the western part of the continent of Africa, next to Senegal, Ivory Coast, Mauritania, but that didn't help at all. So nowadays, I just say I'm from Wakanda. On a serious note, these questions were becoming more and more frustrating. And I couldn't understand why I knew more about my peers than they knew about me. Sadly, too many international students can relate to my story. What I'm talking about today goes beyond my personal experience. These comments and questions and assumptions made me question why. Why were people who had never been to a place could judge it so harshly? When I watched author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk, I learned about the danger of single stories. My peers were only exposed to the miserable single story of the dark continent. At home, they're asked to finish that plate because an African kid would be grateful to have it. At school, they learn about world history, but that just means America, Europe, and a little bit of slavery. Online, they like pictures of friends, high school friends who went on a mission trip somewhere in Africa to feed starving communities. And in the news, the only coverage they would get is crisis, war, and instability. In other words, they grow up in an environment that never depicts a full and balanced picture of my continent. Surprisingly, this single story is so predominant that when you type life in Africa on a Google search, this is what you see. It even suggests tags like poor, but the more balanced picture should include this. In comparison, I was confused as why is it that we know about issues in Flint, Michigan with their water crisis, social issues like police brutality, yet that doesn't show up when you type life in America. This is what you see. Because they're known for patriotism, equality, and liberty. Additionally, in France, we know about the violent recent protest. However, when you type life in Europe, this is what you see. And here it suggests a tag as beautiful. At the end of the day, Europe is a beautiful destination. My point is, a place should not be only known for its challenges. The biggest strength of the African continent is diversity. 54 countries and up to 2,000 languages. So when you ask us, what language do we speak? We literally have 2,000 options, and no, African is not one of them. Every place on the continent has so much to offer. You can have similarly great experiences around the world as you would have in Africa. A study abroad at La Sorbonne is great, but so is one at University of Cape Town. Sipping a cocktail in the Bahamas, amazing. but so is one in Senegal. Sipping a cocktail, like I said, is great, but so is hiking Mount Kenya, visiting museum in Marrakesh, riding camels next to the pyramids. So all of those are also great experiences that are also part of our identity, yet they're never fully described or showcased. To give more perspective on my normality, I like to talk about my childhood. Like many other African kids, I grew up watching shows like Hannah Montana, The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. I also had tons of game nights with my friends playing Uno, and we also argue about the rules. And I cannot deny it, I did see lions and giraffes. But at the zoo or during a safari, they were not taking me to school. Eventually, I had to face this ultimate question. So if it's that great, why are you here? Fair enough. Well, unfortunately, things are not ideal, which is why students like me travel from all over the world to gain professional experience and higher education that is better quality, because unfortunately, our education system is not as good as yours, which is why we invest so much to be here. We are part of a generation that want to go back and change this negative narrative of the continent. Our version of the African dream includes coming here and getting these tools that we need to make our dream a reality at home. I'm standing here today to encourage you all to stay away from these negative stereotypes. Stay away from single stories. Try to picture and build that picture yourself through education, but most importantly, through experiences. Go visit. Introducing ourselves should not be nerve-wracking or turn into a geography/history lesson. So let me reintroduce myself. My name is Lala, and I'm from Mali. Thank you.